So this video is going to go over editing your rating periods that have already been set up here. So if you have a page that already looks like this under your rating periods tab on Learning Genie, we're going to be walking through how to make changes to the groups and how to add groups if you need them. If you do not yet have a screen that looks like this, you are going to need to start from the beginning and set your rating period groups. So I have a separate video that walks you through that process. I also want you to take a look up here on your date range, your school year drop down here. If it is listed as 2018-2019, you might need to add a new school year for 2019-2020. And in that case, I have another video again walking you through that from the beginning if you ever need to add a new school year here. So if you are trying to edit your 2019-2020 school year rating periods, we're going to walk through that today. So the groups that you'll see here are broken up by the different date ranges of their assessments. So if you have a program or a group of classes that all fall within the same rating period schedule, they would be in the same group here. If you have a different group of classes that fall under a different schedule, they would be in a separate group. If you have some classes that don't fall under these two date ranges and you need to make a third group, you can do so here. This will walk you through from the beginning to set all of your date ranges for a new group, and it'll also ask you to assign classes to that particular group. If you need to edit one of your groups, maybe you need to edit a date range, or if you need to edit classes, you can click on that group and you'll be given the option to edit either the classes that are assigned to it, or you can edit the date ranges, the first assessment period duration, or your late enrollment policy. Now, I want to specifically point out the late enrollment policy because this is one of the more specific features on Learning Genie that I want to make sure everybody understands. If I edit my late enrollment policy, you'll see that there are a few different options for ways to determine a child's rating period when they enroll in your program. Now, if a child enrolls really late in your program, they may not qualify for that class's assessment. If they enroll a few days before the assessment period ends, you may want them to start with the next alias. So you would have to determine whether or not you want to set a cutoff date. You can set a cutoff date by enrollment or by completion date, and we'll go through those in a second. Or you can set it by determining the minimum required duration of a rating period. So if you don't have specific dates, but you know that every rating period needs to have at least 60 days in order to be considered a full assessment period, you may want to select this option instead. This will allow you to determine the number of days that is required at minimum for your agency, and that will help Learning Genie determine how many rating periods that child gets. So if that child, for example, enrolls when there's only, let's say, 165 days left in the school year, that means that it wouldn't quite that child wouldn't quite be able to make the deadline for 3 different rating periods, because that would require 180 days, because each rating period requires 60 days at minimum. So that child would be moved to the next rating period and they would only have the next 2 rating periods. If that child enrolls when there's fewer than 120 days left, that means they wouldn't even have enough days for 2 rating periods, so they would just be moved to the last rating period in the school year. I hope that makes sense. So that's the minimum required duration option here. If you want to set a cutoff date, that's a little bit simpler. You can set a cutoff date by looking at the child's enrollment date or looking at that child's completion date, and you can set a cutoff date based on either of these dates. So the enrollment cutoff date means that a child would need to enroll by a certain date in order to qualify for that rating period. So if a child enrolls a little bit after the enrollment cutoff date, they would be moved to the next rating period alias. If you want to set a completion cutoff date, that is going to allow you to set a date that that child must complete their assessment in order to qualify for that rating period. Again, this is 2 different ways to look at something very similar. You're either looking at when the child must enroll or when the child must complete their first rating period in order to qualify for each of these. So I'm going to go ahead and select my enrollment cutoff date. So if I had selected the completion cutoff date, the reason why I'm getting this is the cutoff date needs to fall after the rating period if you're selecting completion cutoff date, because it would not make sense to have a completion cutoff date that was in the middle of a rating period, because no child is going to be complete with their assessments in the middle of the rating period. So I'm just going to go ahead and move that to enrollment cutoff date. We do have example videos to kind of give you a visual of what each of these selections looks like. I'll go ahead and click Save. If you ever need to edit the classes that apply to this rating period, you can click Edit here, and this will walk you through selecting your classes for this particular rating period group. You can see the ones that are already selected, and you can select new ones if you need to move them from another group. We already talked about the rating period dates a little bit, but I'll go ahead and show you that screen as well. You can set your start and end date, and if you select your first assessment duration, that will automatically adjust this first rating period date range. So you can see if I select 45 days, it'll move that automatically. You can also select if you want your aliases to be in season or in time. This one is set to seasons. If you put time, it'll show time 1, time 2, etc. I'll go ahead and save my changes. I also want you to be aware that you can take a look at individual children's rating periods as well. And what that's going to show you is what each child's rating period is, and you can make edits to the children individually. I just got logged out here. So when you click on individual child's rating periods, you'll be able to edit a child. You'll be able to edit the individual children. So I can edit each individual child's rating periods if I need to. I also will be able to edit that child's alias if I need to as well individually. You can download these into an Excel file as well, and you can filter each individual child by centers or by class as well. Now under rating period group, I just want to point out a couple things. You can download a rating period by group Excel sheet, which will show you the classes that are in each group and give you a printout for the cutoff dates as well. So if I download my rating period by group here, it will give me an Excel file that shows the different date ranges for each of the groups. It gives me the alias. It tells me the cutoff date. You can see that one of mine is done by enrollment and one is done by completion. And it also tells you which centers and classes fall under each of these different groups. The edit rating period by class will take you to the Manage Center page where you will be able to edit each class's rating period if you do not feel like changing the settings for the entire group. You can also change them by class. I hope that that is a helpful tutorial for you. If you ever have any questions, please feel free to give us a ring. Our phone number is 760-576-4822. Thanks so much, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.